Welcome to the Obvious Leadership Podcast, where we dive into practical leadership insights that are, well, obvious. Your hosts have walked the talk, and now they're sharing their knowledge, strategies, and advice. Let's jump into today's episode and explore the world of leadership with your hosts, Joey and Omar.
Morning, brother.
Good morning.
How are we doing today?
Oh man, I'm doing great, man. Doing great. How about you?
Hey, it's still hot, but looking forward to it finally cooling down a bit, Like yeah.
False promises, man. False promises. We'll see when it gets here.
Yeah, it really is. Like you got the heat coming down from the north because of the trapped smoke, right? And then you got whatever this heat wave is, and I think it's actually stayed longer than what they expected.
Yeah, well.
Yeah. It's crazy. It's what's funny though, right, is that they've talked about this and they've mentioned it for years, I think almost decades, that if things don't change, you're gonna see like almost like a heat dome over a certain part of the US, starting with like the southern states. And that's exactly what's happening, right? You have all this research, you have all this work compiling, showing you if you don't change, this will happen.
Yeah.
And it's funny because it got me thinking, right? Like relating to us, how often have like you noticed the trend and you're like, we got to get ahead of this. If we don't get ahead of this change or this trend, we're going to be left behind. We're going to be struggling, and then we're going to be caught with like our pants down trying to catch up, right?
Yeah, man. It's one of those things as a leader, or even, it depends on who's noticing those trends, right? Because, and it depends on what needs to be done, right? Because sometimes it's just like, hey, look, the attention needs to be that, hey, you know about it so that you can avoid it in the future, right? Sometimes that's all it takes. But sometimes it's more so like you got to put in a little bit of a action plan to get things done, and you need more people involved. But it just depends on the situation. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of times where people just kind of like, okay, well, I don't see anything happening. And I think it'll go away.
Yeah. No, it's a little unrelated, right? But it's funny because that just got me thinking. So many moons ago, right? So this, I used to be in wireless retail, and the company I was with, they had, at this point, close to a couple hundred locations across the US. And if you know anything about retail, you know that you have to have licensed music playing. You can't just be playing the radio station. You can't just be playing like Pandora or a disc or anything like that. You have to hold a license to be able to play music in retail locations. And the reason I bring this up is it had been brought up multiple times. Like, aren't we supposed to have like some kind of like station that way we can control? So we're not, for me, it was like, so we're not playing like competitors' music or like their commercials in our own place of work. Customers are here.
Right.
And like, no. Well, apparently there is I think it's a federal body or agency that actually goes around to retail locations to see if you are playing music that is not licensed, because they will fine you per location.
Wow, that's crazy.
So it may not seem like a lot, right? Like, okay, a couple $1,000. But once you start realizing that they're doing it per location, right?
Yeah.
Like, for instance, if you own a couple hundred locations, that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, well, so are they charging you, like, let's say one location is, one location isn't, or is it just like, if one location is, we assume that all locations are?
I'm thinking it's an assumption, because obviously if one location doesn't have it, the probability is the rest of the locations don't. Because if you did have it, it would automatically be part of the build when you take over that location. This is what's going to institute, and this is what we're going to be playing music from, right?
Interesting. Yeah, there was a service called Muzak that we used to have. That's what we used to play. But it's funny we talk about that, right? Because sometimes as a leader, like we might have that outlook and saying, hey, look, if one person's doing it, every person's doing it, right? That's definitely I don't think that's the right way to look at things. You definitely
Yeah.
have to know when you have to investigate to figure out, what exactly somebody's mindset is around something. So I mean, as a leader, you don't want to do that. You gotta definitely make sure that, hey, look, if something's going wrong, you need to take time to understand why they're doing something some way, right? Or if it's just something that needs to be corrected, like take care of it. You know what I mean? Don't let
Yep.
it get.
Oh yeah. And so I'll say this, like personally, like with those kind of on that topic of like listening to music and frame of mind, right? I personally don't like there being like such a wide variety of music playing where it's down tempo, it's slow, it's depressing,
Yeah.
right? Because don't matter how much you like this or not, the reality is that the music you listen to while you're interacting does affect the kind of interactions you have as well as how you feel. So when you got a bunch of like depressing music playing, it literally kills the mood.
Yeah.
So where your team would have been fired up, your customers would have been excited. Now there's something off in the air, and it literally has to do with music. And the thing that sucks about these, like, so the service that they used, I think was like retail radio, but there's a bunch of them, right? You can't control the kind of music that plays. It's just an online radio station where
Yeah.
the tracks are like pre-selected and they play in a loop, right? That's why if you feel like if you walk into a mall location and you're like, oh, I've heard this song before, you probably have if you've been to that location multiple times because it just plays on a loop.
Right.
But that's kind of like, because that literally affects the people's frame of mind where your people would have been excited, they would have been ready to go. Now something is off. Their mood is off kilter now, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, honestly, like music has such a big effect on your mentality and the way that people perform. I mean, I've done a lot of research on like I was big into working out and how
Okay.
like out um like the beat, the tempo of the song sometimes can determine your maximum heart rate.
Damn.
That's crazy, right? Like a song can determine that, but because you're listening to it, your body and your mind kind of sync up with that song. And so if you're listening to elevator music, you're not going to burn any calories. You might as well just go to sleep, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, it's all about the environment that you set for your people. Like you have to be aware of those things, and so if you're aware as a leader, right, and you're coming up and saying like, hey, look, I think this is affecting the way that we're having interactions, then do something about it, right? I mean, you can't
Yeah.
just let it sit there and dwell and like, well, maybe we can overcome it and maybe we can this and that, like do something about it.
Yeah, you got to. It's as a leader, it's about removing those obstacles for your team and enabling your team to be able to perform, right? Yes, part of it is going to be the training that you help them with, that you provide them. It's going to be the support. It's going to be the development as well. But you also need to understand there's going to be outside factors, right? You can only do so much to be able to help and assist your team in performing, and then obviously they got to do the other part themselves. But there is a third factor, which is external, which are going to be the things that we cannot control. It's funny because there's I don't know if it's a military term, but there's like a phrase where you can prepare as much as you want. And actually, I think it's for the military because of the next part. You can prepare for any exercise as much as you want.
Yeah.
But the moment the enemy starts shooting at you, all the planning goes out the window, right? Because you're going to fall back to whatever your training was. But it can only do so much in those instances because you have a third factor that you really can't account for, right?
Yeah, I kind of equate that to those learning videos that we had to do in retail, right? So you could get all that training that you want, but as soon as a customer starts talking, all that goes out the window. You know what I mean? Only thing that matters, right, is what the employee might be going through is like the only thing that matters is closing that sale, right? Sometimes it might be something awkward might come out of their mouth, something, like it's so crazy. Like if you think about like the mentality of somebody that isn't comfortable in getting some of those things done, there's so many things that can go wrong because they're not in the right frame of mind to have that conversation with that client.
And not only the right frame of mind, but also one of the biggest things you got to learn, not as just as a leader, but also help your team understand, is how to reframe things, right? Because how often are they trying to explain a concept or explain something simple, but it's not connecting, or the customer's trying to explain something to them, but it's not connecting. So it's kind of like this circle, and it's just frustrating everybody. Or it could be that, something happened that got them upset, and now they're stuck on that. When you can help them understand how to reframe things, you help them to be able to not internalize everything and be able to flip it so that they can get ahead of that, so it doesn't affect them. And I'm not going to say it's not going to affect them. It's going to affect them to some point, but at least now you're helping them with that skill set so that they can essentially take themselves out of there and think of it in a different light, so that they don't, one, internalize it and let them affect them in a more grave aspect. But now you're also allowing them to find a way to move forward, right? Yeah. I think a lot of reason that, and maybe I'm just talking about like my personal background, right, that people like to follow great leadership is because they give them something that they didn't have before. And I'm not going to say, I didn't get this, or I didn't get that. It's that there's different aspects that not everybody in your personal life will be able to introduce you to, because of the differences in the backgrounds of their upbringing, of their career path, of their mindset, right?
Yeah.
And having that like outside look into how things can be able to change can impact you tremendously, especially when it looks like it's opening brand new doors that you never thought that you could have before.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a lot of terms that describe what a leader does or can do, right?
Yeah.
And we're talking about a leader, not necessarily a manager, right? But I think one of the things to do is inspire, right? And when you inspire somebody to do something, I feel like the person that is going to follow you or looking to follow you sees the value in what you have to offer and how it may affect where they are trying to get, and that creates that person's need to follow what you're offering. You know what I mean? Like, all around value. And it may be subconscious sometimes, but if they can understand, hey, look, I really think I'm going to get more out of this person than what I was intending, or what I've got, like you said, what I've got before. I feel like it's a great way for somebody just to subconsciously say and subconsciously connect and say, hey, look, I think I'm going to follow this guy, wherever he goes, so I can better myself, better my results, and things like that.
Oh yeah. And talking about that, so I have that video we've talked about before, because this is on point, the first follower.
Mhm.
So let me put that on real fast. Let me see. How can I do this? All right, there we go. All right, can you see it, Joey?
Yes, sir.
All right.
If you've learned a lot about leadership and making a movement, then let's watch a movement happen start to finish in under 3 minutes and dissect some lessons. First, of course, a leader needs the guts to stand alone and look ridiculous. But what he's doing is so simple, it's almost instructional. This is key. You must be easy to follow. Now here comes the first follower with a crucial role. He publicly shows everyone else how to follow. Notice how the leader embraces him as an equal. So it's not about the leader anymore. It's about them, plural. Notice how he's calling to his friends to join in. So it takes guts to be a first follower. You stand out, you brave ridicule yourself. Being a first follower is an underappreciated form of leadership. The first follower transforms a lone nut into a leader. If the leader is the flint, the first follower is the spark that really makes the fire. Now here's the second follower. This is a turning point. It's proof the first has done well. Now it's not a lone nut and it's not two nuts. 3 is a crowd and a crowd is news. A movement must be public. Make sure outsiders see more than just the leader. Everyone needs to see the followers because new followers emulate followers.
This part starts to get crazy.
Now here come 2 more people, then 3 more immediately. Now we've got momentum. This is the tipping point, and now we have a movement. As more people jump in, it's no longer risky. If they were on the fence before, there's no reason not to join in now. They won't stand out, they won't be ridiculed, and they will be part of the in crowd if they hurry. Over the next minute, you'll see the rest who prefer to stay part of the crowd, because eventually they'd be ridiculed for not joining. And ladies and gentlemen, that is how a movement is made. So let's recap what we've learned. If you are a version of the shirtless dancing guy, all alone, remember the importance of nurturing your first few followers as equals, making everything clearly about the movement, not you. Be public, be easy to follow. But the biggest lesson here, did you catch it? Leadership is over-glorified. Yes, it started with the shirtless guy, and he'll get all the credit, but you saw what really happened. It was the first follower that transformed a lone nut into a leader. There's no movement without the first follower. See,
Yep. So I'll go ahead and leave it there. But that's like part of the big old thing that not everybody really thinks about when it comes to leadership is that there's
totally all
you
need to be leaders.
where'd it go?
Really
In order to lead, you definitely have to I don't know how to turn this off. In order to be able to lead, you definitely have to be able to have that follower, right? And if you don't, that's where it becomes difficult. You have to be able to assist and support your team, the people that you're trying to get ahead, because it's really all about them, right? As a leader, you can come in and say, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that, I'm gonna do that. But if it's not in support of your team, and if you're not supporting your team to get there, right, almost treating them in, just like you saw in that video, as a type of leader, because they're going to help everybody else understand this as well, you're going to struggle. You're going to get a lot of pushback. And the reality is you're probably not going to succeed in that role. And it's only going to be a matter of time before you end up moving out, right, or get moved out.
Well, so there's a couple of things I saw there, right? It goes back to like almost coaching, right? They got that first person to join them. And the first thing that he did when he went over there was kind of mold him to the way that he was wanting it to be done, right?
Yeah.
He didn't stop them and tell them that they're doing it wrong. He gave them a little bit of direction, correction, right?
Yeah.
And that person was able to follow along, right? And it almost looked to me like, hey, man, it looks so simple that it made somebody else want to join in, right? So it can't be that it's complicated. But the other thing that I saw there, man, is that a lot of times as a new leader, even as, you know, an experienced leader, you cannot do everything yourself, right? That is not how things get done. You get more things done, the more people you get involved. And that boils down to the kind of influence that you have on the people that need to be following what your direction, right? I mean, that are under you, right? So, I mean, if you don't have the influence, then you are going to be stuck doing all that stuff yourself. And I mean, at the end of that video, you saw how many people were involved. Can you imagine if this was a task or you know, some kind of business focus? When you have that many people working on something versus that one person that is there trying to do everything themselves, man, they're not going to get anywhere fast, man.
Yeah, and to your point, it's imagine you being that one person that's trying to teach every single person what you're doing individually.
Right.
It's time consuming. You're going to be wasting your time. the song is over by the time you're able to get through less than a quarter of the people. Whereas everybody now is in almost in unison, wanting to move in the same direction. And it makes moving forward, it makes pivoting to to whatever challenges, whatever changes you're facing a lot easier, because now you don't have so many people pushing against the grain as you do pushing, or people wanting to push forward, to move forward towards that change. It's funny because it harkens back to one of the conversations we had a few episodes ago about keystone habits, right? Like your cornerstone habits that you are going to pivot change around. Make it so that it's easy, make it so that people feel ridiculous to argue against, but by making it easy to understand the concept and understand how this is important, not just to them, but to everybody else. And you're going to get maybe a slight pushback, right? Because obviously in that video, not everybody jumped in right away. It took that one person. Once that one person was like, okay, this is easy, and everybody sees that, a little bit later, you have that other person, and then it just starts coming in waves where everybody starts moving in that same direction. And it's much easier than putting everybody on like performance plans or on write-ups, because now you have resentment, which is going to deteriorate everything that you are working towards.
Well, this goes back to your original, the way we started this video, right? If you don't take care of something, right, consider that dancing a bad habit, right? Because some people may see that as a bad habit. But like, you see how it's spread, right? This is also, it also can be bad, right? So if you don't take care of things and you correct that behavior, i.e. dancing better, it's going to be out of control, and everybody's going to be doing it the wrong way, right? I mean, so especially implementing something new, you have to be there to coach, to give feedback, do role plays, right? So that you make sure that everybody gets on the right track from the beginning, and that doesn't derail and turn into a mosh pit, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's like a big one. And it's really you as a leader, right? You can't blame your team. I guarantee you we're going to say this multiple times, and it doesn't matter. You're going to hear this as a leader. When it comes to success, it's your team that succeeds. When it comes to failure, it's you as a leader that fails, because it falls on you. As a leader, you don't want to take praise for what your team did. Yes, you coach them and you help develop them. But at the end of the day, it's the team's effort as to, where they got. So give your team the proper praise, right? Acknowledge what they brought towards the table so that they can get a chance to actually sit at the table and feel as though they're cared for, they're wanted, that their contributions matter. And when it comes to leadership, when the team fails, it's the leader's direction that failed the team. So you got to own it up. You can't throw your team under the bus. That was all on you. They moved in the direction that you pushed forward, or they didn't move in the direction because you didn't push that direction forward.
Right? Yeah. Well, it all depends on how you're looking at it, right? And it's one of the things that, I remember as a young leader, I would always put timelines on progress, right? I wouldn't look at progress as baby steps or any steps in the right direction. I would look at, man, if I didn't achieve this by a certain amount of time, I didn't do my job, right? And it's about, like, taking a look at the holistic view of where you were and where you've gotten, right? And honestly, like, some things that I guess what really helped me kind of identify where I've gotten was kind of like writing stuff down, like, as I go, right?
Yeah.
Having like a little bit of a leadership journal, hey, look, these are the small things that I've worked on. These are the couple things that I've affected. These are the couple things that we've overcome. Like, just because I'm not to 150% a goal in 3 months doesn't mean I failed, right? And that's why, like, leadership is you got to be in for the long run. You know what I mean? It's you can't, saying, oh, well, when I get to this point, I've succeeded. Like, really performing leadership is the success that you want, right? It's not necessarily a destination, right? So
Oh yeah.
it's going to keep going on and on and on. You can't stop, because once you stop leading people is when you stop succeeding.
Oh yeah, big time. And here, I know I felt this way before, right? To your point, to piggyback off your point, when you write things down, it does a couple of different things, right? Not only are you setting those goals, this is what I'm going to shoot for, and you start thinking of solutions towards the problems, because that's going to be a big one. As a leader, you're going to run into the feeling of feeling like an imposter, right? Either you're taking up a new challenge and you have no idea what the hell you're doing, and you're trying to figure it out. And you're like, I was never trained for this. Most leaders aren't, FYI. Part of leadership is you're figuring it out as you're going. But you're gonna, if you feel as an imposter, that's actually not necessarily a bad thing. It means a couple of things. It means you're scared, and being scared is actually a good sign, because it shows that you actually care about what you're doing in the direction you're moving forward in, right? But by also writing things down, you start to overcome that imposter syndrome, and you start to think of yourself in those leadership terms, because a lot of it is going to be frame of mind, the mindset that you're in, before, during, and after. And that's going to affect everything, because as a leader, you can't come in 100% thinking it as like a salesperson, right? You got to change the mindset from being a salesperson to being like, what I call a change leader, right? You're in leadership, looking at ways to change things for the better. Doesn't mean you're going to reinvent the wheel. Sometimes that change is going to be a minor little twist, and that change, that small little focus, can pivot you that 10 to 50% more in volume and productivity than you were getting before. But part of, like you were saying, Joy, writing it down. And there are a lot of people that struggle in leadership that don't understand that concept, because it feels, in retrospect, it feels asinine. Like, to write things down, like, how old school are we going? But it's not about old school. It's about the psychology behind it and how that affects it. And there's plenty of research that shows when you write things down, that the probability of you doing that or moving towards that increases. Now, it's not to say, yes, you're going to achieve this 100%, but it means that you're moving in that direction. And there's other things that you can do as an individual, as a salesperson, as a leader, that will help you there, right?
Well, like, do you remember? I remember as a punishment as a kid, man. You remember writing sentences, having to write the same thing 100 times?
Yep.
Okay, yeah. So, like, I guess it clicked with me one day that sometimes, like, I think there is a psychology of writing something, right? I'm not really sure if that psychology transfers to typing it in your phone. I don't know that it does, but anyways, long
I
story
think they're
short,
still trying to figure that one out.
yeah, I don't know how they're going to track that, man. But honestly, they so whenever you write things down, you're writing the same thing down over and over and over again to hopefully it'll stick in your head, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what I found is that, like, sometimes I had to repeat things to myself. I had to literally talk to myself to remind myself of the focuses that I wanted to focus on. And, like, I found myself every day before I go into the car, before I go into the location in the car, I'd sit there and, like, hey, this is what I'm focusing on. And I literally say it to myself 8 to 10 times. And when I went in there, I was in a different mindset, right, than when I was just driving to work, right? I go in there for something that that I knew needed immediate attention. When I walked in there, I had to have a dedicated focus to something. And that's how I changed my mindset, because, like, I'm sitting here just talking, hey, this is what I'm going to focus on. This is why I'm going to focus on it. This is how I'm going to do it. And I'd say those things to myself, preparing myself to walk into there with a, like a ball of fire, saying that, hey, look, this is the way I've always been, and this is the way I want to be. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know if that's making sense, but
No, it does. And you're actually hitting on, because it really is psychology, right? There's a guy, he's not a psychology guy. He's actually a Navy SEAL, former Navy SEAL. David Goggins. All right. He's written several books. One of them, if you ever get a chance to hear it on audiobook, do it, because he doesn't do like a normal audiobook. He does like audiobook / podcast commentary while you're listening to it. It's called Can't Hurt Me. And he actually talks about that because at one point in his life, he was overweight before he joined the Navy and became a SEAL. He was overweight, unhealthy, unathletic. And he talks about the process that he took to, get him out of that. And part of it was not only writing things down, but it was putting it on stickies and putting it on the mirror. And every single morning, he would go brush his teeth and he would see that, but it wasn't a matter of just seeing it. He would repeat it to himself in the mirror. Because guys, listen, a lot of it, like I said, it sounds asinine, but it's all these little things that will help you move forward in the direction that you want. And I guarantee you've heard of maybe some of your idols, some of your mentors have mentioned this. If you're in leadership, you got to read books. There's just no way around it. It's the easiest way to get into the mind of somebody that you might admire, or to understand and find new, what you can call tips, tricks, and hacks, right? To be able to assist you in what you're moving forward to. But part of it, yes, writing it down. There's a psychology. It is widely researched on why things should be written down. I don't know about the typing part, right? But the other part of it is self-talk. Hyping yourself up, telling yourself, right? It's not just writing it down, but also telling yourself. And if you're listening to us right now, pause this video and write down 3 things that you either want to achieve or you want to change, right? And I'm not saying like, oh, I'm going to do $1 million overnight. Be real, right? And hey, maybe $1 million overnight is real because you have a deal that's going to be closing, right? But write something down realistic that you would either like to change or like to achieve in, say, like the next 15 to 30 days. After you've written it down, literally look yourself in the mirror and say it 3 times. I don't know why there's a magic thing when it comes to threes, and you've heard it, like the principle of threes, the rule of 3. Write it down 3 times, say it to yourself 3 times. I guarantee you will physically feel different in a good way. I guarantee that. And you can even comment and let us know what that was or how you felt in the comment section. But I don't know how, I don't know necessarily why. I've read some of the research. I don't fully understand it because it feels like some mumbo jumbo, make me feel good thing. But from personal experience, I've done it. It works. It literally works, as crazy as it sounds.
There's a couple things go along with that, man, because it's you can't be a hollow bag of ideas, and I know that, but like, you can't go in there telling people you want them to do something but not believing it yourself.
Yeah,
you're not gonna get anybody to follow you, right? So if you don't hype yourself up, if you don't really believe in what you're trying to coach to, then nobody's gonna follow you. You know what I mean? And you mentioned about the guy putting stickies on the thing. That brings back one specific moment in a movie that I watched, man, as a kid. It was Rocky IV. Rocky IV takes a picture of Drago and he puts it on the mirror. Right? He's in that cabin working out. Every day he looks in that mirror. He's focused on what he knows he needs to overcome.
Yeah, big time. And think about it, like you mentioned it, right? You've worked out, you understand some of those things like music. How often would you be working out and you have to hype yourself up. You have to tell yourself what you're going to achieve, right? In order to actually hit it. And that feeling you get when you picture yourself doing it, and that's a completely different topic. I don't know if we'll have enough time to talk about that necessarily, about the power of visualization today, but just that feeling you get when you hype yourself up and you're about to hit it. Do you stop? No, you know this. You keep going because you're like, I'm right there. I'm right there. Let me just struggle to get past it. And that feeling of like euphoria once you hit that PR, right?
Yeah. Yeah, man, I'll tell you, man, and yeah, that's one of the things I'm trying to get back into is, working out and things like that. But man, I mean, I used to try and work out without music, but honestly, I found out that I was insane for trying to do that. Like the outside environmental effect that music has on you, man, is just it's crazy how it can drive you to do more than what you thought you could do. You know what I mean? And just by listening to music, and then also, I used to have a soundtrack of, hey, look, these different songs is what I'm going to play. This number of songs. This is how long it is, and that will kind of dictate how long I have in my workout, right? I mean, it was awesome. So I can kind of time things based on how long I wanted to work out. And man, it worked out really well for me. And those are all things, man. I'm talking about this. Those are things I need to work on. I need to put my workout playlist back together.
Yeah, and to your point, right? There's so much that can affect you, but once you're able to take control of the controllables, listen, life's going to happen. Things are going to happen. It becomes so much easier as a leader and even in your personal life to understand you control the controllables. The uncontrollables are going to happen. Those are things you need to understand. You can't control it. You can't control the direction of the economy, for instance, right? But you can control how you react to what's going on to a certain degree. And when you understand what you can and cannot control and accept that, it's easier to move forward. So like in your case of working out, you understand you can't control the outside factors, but you can control how you can zone yourself into what you're doing so that you can focus only on that. And you saw for yourself how that changed, like your workout routine, guaranteed to change the results. And if you really think about it, it's a small change that you did.
Yeah.
That yields completely different results. And that's what we're talking about. When we're talking about obvious leadership, when we're talking about leadership changes, these are all small things that you can do to be able to implement to move yourself in the right direction, that even though there's small little changes, when you look at it in a big view, like in a big picture view, they amount to like bigger changes because they're being stacked on top of each other. And those small little things that you're going to do as an individual, as a leader, that you're going to introduce to your teams, that you're going to help them develop, that will start to yield completely different results and will get you known within your organization and maybe even, outside organizations about what you're capable of doing as a leader.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, no, I think that's awesome, man. That brings back to one of the things that you said. I think it's 1% better every day.
Yeah.
That's what working out's all about. I mean, that's honestly, I feel like that's leadership is the same way, man. It's, you have to make sure that you're just trying to improve yourself a little bit every day, right? And that needs to translate to affecting the people that are working for you, right? Providing that value, getting that one person to follow you a little bit more to where you need to be.
Yeah, 100%. Oh man, we're gonna have to cut it short today, guys. We're already coming up to our time for the day. But I think we will talk about the power of visualization for you guys, right? Because what we're talking about right now really goes hand in hand to that, and that is huge. I'm gonna see if I can find this clip that literally talks about the psychological power to it. But to that point, guys, thanks for stopping in. We'll catch you on the next one.
All right, appreciate it. Later.
All right, Joy. Take care, man.
Later, dude.
And that brings us to the end of today's Obvious Leadership episode. Remember, every great leader starts with one step, and you're already on your way. Small changes lead to significant impact. Until next time, keep leading with purpose, and remember that leadership is the key to unlocking extraordinary results.